Cast unanimous ballot for those already.
Welcome third in Right to Life of Michigan's three-part series focusing on the dignity of life in the Black community. I'm Tina Tyler, the Director of Multicultural Outreach for Right to Life of Michigan. Tonight we'll talk about two justice issues, abortion and racism. As pro-life people, we care about the lives of all people of every race, culture, creed, class, level of development, and physical, emotional, and socioeconomic condition. We know that all people have dignity and they should be treated with equity for the entirety of their lives. How are the evils of abortion and racism intertwined? And what can we do to advocate for the unborn as well as those that are experiencing injustice and discrimination in their lives? Let's talk about it. Joining me tonight are Christina Caramo and Catherine Davis. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Christina Caramo is an educator whose primary passion is to defend the Christian faith, advocating for a society based around Christian principles. One of those principles is that all human beings, no matter their condition, have intrinsic value because they are made in the likeness and image of God. Christina believes this is why the issue of abortion is so problematic. Abortion not only kills innocent human beings, but it advocates the utilitarian view of humans, that we are only valuable based on our perceived immediate usefulness to someone else. Christina is an educator at Wayne County Community College. She's a graduate of Oakland University and also recently graduated from Biola University with a master's in Christian apologetics. Christina desires to take the things she has learned and pass the information on to others. She wants to write books, lecture, and create film projects, especially working to stop the epidemic of young people walking away from the Lord to follow the deception of the materialistic modern world. Christina runs a website, ChristinaCaramo.com. She's an active member in the pro-life movement, not only serving with Right to Life of Michigan, but also with Stanton, Detroit. She believes that we all have a purpose in life, and if we don't recognize that about the most defenseless of us, the babies in the womb, we have lost our humanity. Welcome, Christina. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
We're glad to have you. And Catherine Davis is joining us from Georgia. She's the founder and president of the Restoration Project. She often partners with the National Pro-Life Coalition, the Network of Politically Active Christians, and the Frederick Douglass Foundation in an ongoing effort to educate Americans about the issues that are impacting the Black community. Catherine, a public speaker and civil rights champion, is a graduate of Tufts University and attended the University of Bridgeport School of Law. Early in 2010, she partnered with the Radiance Foundation to launch one of the most news-generating pro-life campaigns ever, the Endangered Species Billboard web campaign. Catherine was featured in numerous TV, radio, and newspaper features, including the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, ABC World News, NPR, and throughout the entire blogosphere. She believes in holding public officials accountable, legislatively chipping away at the practices and policies that are ravaging a free America. A former candidate for Congress in Georgia's 4th District, Catherine's focused on positive change through education, local state involvement, and peaceful action. Thanks for joining us, Catherine.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with you, and we're going to begin by explaining why we chose the topic, the difference between spit and rain. You want to explain that for us?
Yeah. Planned Parenthood for a very long time has billed itself as a champion of women, and especially women of color, Black women. But their policies and their agenda is something very different from that. And every time they implement one more thing in their policy, we can analogize it to being spit upon. When it rains, rain is a life-giving thing. It helps trees and plants and flowers grow. It's something that generates life. But spit is just wet and nasty. And every time Planned Parenthood says that, for example, they will tell Black women it's safer for you to abort your child than carry to term or give birth, that's a big glob of spit on a Black woman. It's not life-giving. It's not helping her grow. When they locate their facilities in Black and Latino neighborhoods, that's another glob of spit because they are specifically targeting Black women. Every time you go in one of their facilities and come out in an ambulance, that's another glob of spit. So, but they want us to believe that that spit is rain, that it's enabling women and empowering women to take control of their lives. And it's just not true.
Christina, do you think racism plays a part in what Planned Parenthood does?
You can't separate an organization from its founding. And just even in the title, you know, spit and rain, I think about the rain is seen as a blessing, you know, and so they kind of portray abortion like it's some type of blessing and a help to a woman. And it's really not, it's a horrible thing for our society. So I don't think that we can separate an organization from its foundation, considering that we only make up 13% of the population and the majority of their clinics are in our communities. So one has to be suspicious. You don't want to accept it because I think it causes some consternation in people because liberals build themselves as these kind of champions of racial justice and equality, and the Planned Parenthood seems to latch onto that cause. So it kind of causes some confusion, I feel, for people to acknowledge that there is a racial component. And I think there's something too when we think about racism. I think when we think about racism, we always think it comes in this form of someone that looks angry and hostile and wants to harm you. There are also like that racism of what we call low expectations. And I think that's the kind that the current Planned Parenthood kind of functions under. This thing that they're actually benefiting and helping Black women kill their children. And they feel that this is somehow going to elevate us and improve us. And that somehow lowering our population numbers is actually a positive thing, because they look at us as a slightly lower human, I feel, to a certain extent. So I think it doesn't manifest in the form that we expect it to. But again, when you're thinking of an organization, or like in Michigan, Black women account for 50% of abortions and we're 14% of the population, then there is a racial component of that because we're being targeted and it's not that many of us. So absolutely.
And just to add a footnote to what she said, Planned Parenthood recently admitted their racism in their organization. They acknowledged that their founder was a racist who hung out with the KKK. They also acknowledged that they have caused reproductive harm in the Black community. So it's not a suspicion anymore. It's a reality that they have acknowledged and stated, yes, this is what we have done. We have caused harm. And it's really less than 13% of the population, because only 3 to 4% of us are of childbearing age at any given point in time. So when you think about 3 to 4% of the Black women of childbearing age having almost 40% of the abortions annually, something is off. And I would posit that it's because of the targeting that Planned Parenthood has done. It's because they've located their facilities in our neighborhoods and they actively pursue Black women every chance they get.
They sure do. Christina, you mentioned a little bit about politics. The current cultural and political climate is telling us that we cannot be against abortion and against racism, but rather that we must choose one evil or the other to fight. How can we advocate for all people experiencing injustice in this environment that we're in?
I think I think that often the people who fall on one political side, when it comes to specifically viewing racial injustice in a particular way, You know, and I think too, that's another thing about the racial injustice conversation is, what do you consider racial injustice? So when a lot of people who kind of enter the public square under the banner of fighting racial injustice, they tend to be progressives who tend to be pro-abortion. And I think that oftentimes people who fight against abortion do see themselves as fighting a racist institution, but they go under the banner of conservative. And then there's this perception in the public square that the conservatives either support or don't care about racism, and the liberals are the ones fighting against it. So I think there is a lot to do with definitions. You know, I heard a teacher tell me once that when you have a conversation, you got to define your terms and what do you mean by that. So I do think that everyone is fighting against certain forms of racism, but the question is, what do you consider racist and what don't you consider racist? And I think part of the problem is that many of the people who champion themselves as social justice warriors don't consider the institution of abortion as targeting Black women. They don't see the racism in abortion in the first place. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, even with the question.
Mm-hmm. Well, go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah, I think Christina is absolutely right that we have this facade that has been woven around abortion as if it's akin to a civil right. And because of that, most people don't recognize that it really is a tool of those who believe and support white supremacy. It is a tool that they have used to control the Black birth rate, as their founder acknowledged she wanted to do when she launched the Negro Project in 1939. Up until a couple of months ago, Planned Parenthood always tried to convince the culture that the Negro Project ended in 1942. But if you look at what's happening with Planned Parenthood today, you can see that the Negro Project is alive and well, because they still go to Black ministers to straighten us out should it occur to any of us more rebellious members, is what Margaret Sanger said. And there are Black ministers today who are still parroting her ideology. Just this week, I saw an article, Georgia, where I live, is having a Senate race that is a special election because our senator resigned. So we have to elect a new one to fill out his term. And there is a well-known pastor in the city of Atlanta who's running for that slot. And he literally said that abortion is a civil right and he will fight for women to keep that right. Negro Project in action, because no one who knows the Bible, no one who understands the Word of God can stand up and say that it's a civil right to take the life of your child. So the Negro Project is alive and well. And this particular candidate has Planned Parenthood's endorsement. And Planned Parenthood said that they were only going to endorse candidates who go above and beyond to protect and expand health access. And health access for them is abortion.
Unmute myself. If I could add I try to mute the background, it's always noise in the background, but if I could just add a point to what Catherine said. I read that article about the pastor and I found it to be so upsetting, the way he reduced a child to a choice. One of the things we learn is every human is imago Dei. Everyone is made in the image of God. And for you to reduce a child to a choice, and that's kind of where you see so many parallels between the abortion industry and slavery. And I think it's so relevant because the whole idea was that Black folks aren't fully human. And so people do the exact same thing. And it's so upsetting to see a pastor do the same thing, saying that baby isn't a person. Because once you acknowledge that child's humanity, then you can no longer sit and consciously support an abortion. And what they do is you have some Christians who will sit there and try to dance around the issue and say, okay, well, I'm personally against the abortion, but I'm not going to stop another person. That's as ridiculous as saying that I don't believe in killing people, so you can kill somebody, but I'm just not going to do it. And so I feel that oftentimes in these spaces that unfortunately many people in the Black community, especially a lot of pastors, feel their only road to political power is through the progressive lane. And they understand that in that progressive lane, they have to endorse abortion. So they're forsaking the lives of these children for their own path to power. And I just feel that that's so troubling when I heard what the pastor said. It was so upsetting.
Very much so. Very, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Abortion has reduced Black America's impact in the political realm because of the numbers of Black people that have been aborted. It's reduced the power of the Black vote. Do you think this contributes to what they're calling systemic racism in this country?
I think that Planned Parenthood is the last bastion of systemic racism in this country. If you understand what racism is, it is not putting a stalk of cotton into a decoration in your house. It is not the fact that someone might have named a white horse Traveler and that was the name of Robert E. Lee's horse. This generation didn't see what racism looked like in the 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s when water hoses were turned on Black men, women, and children so forcefully that it peeled literally their clothes off their backs, or when the KKK rode into town and snatched a child out of the house and tortured him to death like they did Emmett Till, or like they did on the Pettus Bridge when they beat John Lewis and so many others. The only difference between that racism of then and today is that you really don't see that baby coming out of the womb, being ripped and shredded into tiny little pieces. Planned Parenthood has made it their mission, they said, for population control. And that is what drives them. And they said that abortion is as necessary to their mission as any other service that they may provide. So we know that they are specifically attempting to control the Black birth rate. That's why Margaret Sanger launched the Negro Project. And as they are going forward, you see it very clearly, as you said, in the numbers. More than 20 million Blacks have been aborted since 1973. That's more than the entire Black population in 1960 America. They've been aborted. There's no other group that has faced that level of death of their children, and yet Planned Parenthood, whose mission is population control, wants us to believe that, oh, well, that's not really what we want. Margaret Sanger was a product of her day. Well, it's her day today too, because they are succeeding in controlling the Black birth rate to the level of more than 20 million. And if you look at the numbers of women that have been sterilized as a result of their abortion decision, then we have no way of knowing the untold numbers of lives that have been taken.
I can add a little bit to that. And it's interesting how things morph over time. And it's like a colliding of worldviews. And the abortion industry is largely, they put these faux religious leaders, and I say that very mildly, they put faux religious leaders up front. And then behind the scenes, they really have a very atheistic worldview. So like she mentioned, they are large proponents of population control in general. They feel like when you have too many people, they take up too many resources. And I remember seeing an interview from Margaret Sanger, and this was again in like the late 50s. I forget the name of the show, or early 60s, when she mentioned, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, one of the most merciful things a family could do to one of its members is to kill it. So that is obviously a very atheistic, if I would argue a satanic worldview, that they feel like it's a good thing to do. And so one of the things that it's like worldviews overlap. And so we have to remember something about the abortion industry is that Margaret Sanger was a believer in eugenics, which was started by Francis Galton. What's interesting is Francis Galton is Charles Darwin's cousin. And Charles Darwin had this view that everything about a human is purely material. We don't have a soul. So all our behaviors, our actions, is all a result of DNA or our genetic code. So when one group was able to successfully conquer or overtake another group, it's because that group was genetically inferior. And when you see higher rates of poverty or any problem, it's because that group is genetically inferior. So they had this idea that Black people were just inherently genetically inferior. That's why we were in the predicament we were in at that time period in the early 20th century. So, and they also believed that we were criminals and all these other things. So one of the best things was to do is to eliminate our defective Negro DNA from, well, I don't know, they didn't use the word DNA because they hadn't discovered at that time, but to remove that defective Negro gene from the gene pool. But in also parallel with their racism, also their idea that one of the ways to help poverty was to lower how many children a woman had. So those two ideas were happening at the same time. So the current Planned Parenthood, I don't think that they necessarily are like, we want to kill Black people. I think they want to lower the Negro population from this perception of, since there's a higher poverty rate in the Black population, we're actually helping them by lowering how many of them have children. So it's still racist, it's just packaged differently. If that makes sense. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I just feel like a lot of it has to do with this idea of we're helping them get out of their poverty by lowering their human population, which is still racism, but it's just packaged a lot differently. That's the way I see, especially nowadays.
I think you're being very generous to Planned Parenthood. I think they deliberately target the Black community because they do want to control our birth rate. And if that means taking us all the way down to 0, they would be fine with that because it achieves their population control goals. They are very deliberate in what they do. And I'll give you an example of why I'm saying that. That billboard campaign that Ryan Baumberger and I were involved in really did set the United States on fire for a season. In response to that, Planned Parenthood went to the Ford Foundation and had them pay a PR firm, Belden Rusinello, to give them talking points to respond to what Ryan and I were saying about the genocidal impact of abortion in the Black community. And they came up with talking points like every community should have access to quality health care. They were told to cite historical disparities whenever the pro-life community refers to the number of abortions on Black women, call for an end to the disparities, and so forth, so on. And they took these talking points to the Congressional Black Caucus and had them have a meeting on the Hill where they rolled out this plan on how to refute what we were saying about the genocidal impact. And they specifically named Ryan by name, they named me by name, they named Walter Hoy by name, and they were saying we have to push back against what they're saying. And that is what they have been doing ever since. They even organized Trust Black Women, came out of that billboard campaign where they had Sister Song put together this group to go around and respond to what Ryan and I were saying. So Ryan was at Georgia State, I think, or Georgia Tech, doing a presentation about the billboards when all these young white women came in and started chanting, "Trust Black women," even though there were Black women in the meeting who wanted to hear what Ryan had to say. It wasn't happenstance. They are very deliberate in their targeting. They are very intentional when it comes to the Black community. You just look at a number of their press conferences. They always try out the Black woman as being the one who's going to be injured if abortions are in any way, shape, or form limited. They always trot out the Black woman, even when they're trying to get permits. In 2012, they wanted to expand their surgical room in a Virginia Planned Parenthood down in near the water. I can't think of the city. And in their certificate of need, they use the Black infant mortality rate and the Black maternal mortality rate to justify the construction of a third surgical room so they could do 1,800 more abortions a year. That's deliberate behavior. That's not different packaging, if you will. They are following the mandate of Margaret Sanger very clearly and pushing this agenda to control the Black birth rate. And yes, there are other groups that may want to impact through population control, the other populations, but Planned Parenthood has been the primary leader in pushing the control of the Black birth rate. I know that was long, right?
No, yeah, they act as though they're doing us a favor, you
right.
know? Yeah,
right.
And that's the thing. They act as though they're doing us a favor and that they're helping us out. They're because like I know what Catherine is talking about, because I've read a statistic where someone said it's safer for a Black woman to get an abortion than give birth. I'm like, wait a minute. I don't know a person who's died in childbirth, and I know a whole lot of mothers, and I know a whole lot of women who've had an abortion too. So I don't understand. You know, I just think that I don't understand how a lot of leadership who bill themselves as fighting against racism can't see it, and that's the question I still don't get. I don't get it. How can they not see? How can they not be concerned at the very least about those high statistics? I mean, just the raw numbers alone of the high abortion rate in our community should be concerning. And I just think it gets into human selfishness, because I don't understand how any leadership could just ignore that. But then progressives have a habit of any movement, especially in current America, that they want to push. They just have to bill it as fighting against racism to shield from criticism. I think that's also some of what's going on, that they use Black women as front people to push their own personal agenda, when in reality they could care less about these Black women.
Exactly.
Catherine, you mentioned earlier about sterilization being kind of a side effect, an after effect of abortion. There are so many effects on women after an abortion and on families and everything. Do you want to talk about that a little bit real quick?
Yeah, you know, we are in a time where we really do need to have this conversation about the impact of abortion on the woman, but it's such a taboo issue. Women get shamed for having the abortion, and then they get shamed if they talk about it. But the reality is there are so many women who right now are hurting because of their abortion decision, and they can't tell anybody why they're hurting. And so it manifests as anger, you know, that stereotypical angry Black woman. I tell people she probably had an abortion and she hasn't been able to talk about it. But the psychological impact, the suicide rates are off the charts when women realize that they made this irrevocable decision and they can't go back and fix it. A dear friend of mine talked about his cousin who'd had an abortion and never told anyone. And finally, when she started exhibiting all of these signs of depression and stuff, he went to her and asked her what was going on. And she finally told him, but she literally starved herself to death. She became anorexic and no one could help her, and they found her dead. There were more of these stories around the country because we don't talk about the real impact of abortion. It is not like having your tooth pulled. You know that you have taken the life of another human being and you don't know what to do with it or where to go with it. There's women who start drinking and drugging and engaging in risk behavior, like the club down on 5th and Vine where everybody's getting shot up, and she never would have gone to that club pre-abortion, and now that's her major hangout in the hopes that she will be one of the ones whose lives get taken. And the women just don't understand that healing is available if they ask. Jesus will forgive them and they can be healed. But we have to first create a safe path for the women to be able to talk about their abortion experience and to warn other women that it is not this benign procedure. I know personally because I had 2 abortions. I was like Scarlett O'Hara, you know, I'll think about it tomorrow, and I just put it out of my mind for a while. But I was that consummate angry Black woman. I drank, I drugged, I became even more promiscuous after that first abortion. And then the second abortion, I literally heard the doctor counting my baby's body parts. And that just sent me way over until I came to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. So I'm not speaking of something that I don't know and that I didn't experience it for myself. And there may be women watching us right now, and I just want to say to them that you can be forgiven. Jesus will forgive you and heal you of that decision. And there is freedom on the other side of the healing, because the guilt that you feel, the shame that you feel against yourself, the terror of someone finding out, all disappears once you get healed. So I would invite them to contact us so that we'll pray with them, we'll counsel with them, we'll help them to reconcile that decision with who they are today.
I can add in a point there to what Catherine said. I still think of a woman I knew who was a terrible alcoholic, and it was sorry guys, it was simply because she had an abortion, and then she never went on to have children later. So that's I'm so sorry. It's a blender. I apologize. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but it had an abortion. I'm so sorry, guys. It's a blender in the background. But she had an abortion, and she had an abortion, and she went on to never have children and became an alcoholic. And it was really, really sad to see. And then after our conversation we had on Sunday, I went on YouTube and started listening to women give their abortion stories. You know, some regretted them, some didn't. But I was reading the comments, and there were so many women in the comment section for like the videos where the women who were supported, who had an abortion, they were trying to give advice or and put a positive spin on it. Many of the women in the comment section was like, oh, I'm just so depressed. I feel so sad. I don't know what to do. And like what Catherine said, this is not getting a tooth pulled. No one gets depressed after getting a tooth pulled. No one gets depressed. You know, people even get their appendix removed. They don't get depressed. There's something innately spiritual happening. Why is it that after women have an abortion, they get so depressed and they get so sad or angry or become alcoholics? And I was talking to someone I know who had an abortion, and they told me that you have to suppress your humanity. And one particular woman, I watched the video, and you could tell she really regretted it, because she was just telling her story, and she was like, her family prayed for her and asked her not to do it, and she just was like dead to the world, and she just had to shut off all of her feelings. Getting a tooth pulled, I don't need to shut off my feelings. And she was saying that while they asked her at the abortion clinic, at the Planned Parenthood, she was actually at a Planned Parenthood, did she want to keep the ultrasound? Did she want to keep the ultrasound picture? And she decided to keep it, because some women decide to keep the ultrasound picture. And she's like, I guard it with my life. She said, it stays with me everywhere I go. No one does that for a tooth pull. So when people try to reduce it, and after our conversations, 2 things I learned, that there's 2 things going on. Well, some of it, these activists are hurt women who've had abortions, and they're looking to find some peace, and they're looking to find not just peace, but they're looking to feel like I made the right choice.
Yes.
They want to feel like I made that right decision, because there's always something, which I believe is God, of course, telling them that wasn't okay. And I think that for so many people, if they acknowledge that is a bad thing, I feel like a whole host of negative emotions are just going to come crashing in that they aren't ready to deal with.
That's right.
I want to say real quick, if anybody has a question or a comment that they want to share with Catherine or Christina, just comment under the live stream and we will try to address those as we go on for the next few minutes. And I also want to add that you can find help resources on Right to Life of Michigan's website, rtl.org. That would be recovery after an abortion, counseling. We have pregnancy resources listed there, so you can go there and find anything that you need in the way of help. We also have a website called Help in the D with way more resources to local resources for you.
And there's an online resource called supportafterabortion.com that they can also, and they will connect them with resources there in Detroit. If they have a fear of someone finding out, they may want to go the anonymous route through supportafterabortion.com.
And the other day when we talked, Catherine, you said that with that statistic of 50% of women, Black women having abortions, you said that that means 1 in every 2 Black women have had an abortion. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a room with other women, you know that they're all around you, the other women who have had abortions. And so it just is so helpful for you to share your witness and to welcome others to, deal with that pain. So it is something that we need to talk about, even though it's very uncomfortable.
And we need to make it comfortable to talk about so that women won't continue buying into this idea that it's just a benign procedure or it's just a clump of cells. We know better, and we know better when we have that abortion and you realize there's nothing you can do. And usually in these abortion centers, there's no discussion between you and a doctor, and you're not getting real counseling from the abortionist. Many women don't even see the abortionist, if they see him or her at all, until that doctor is in between their legs. And so they're not being counseled and given true information. They're not being told that there is a link between breast cancer and abortion, or that there's a link between premature birth and subsequent children and abortion. That there's a link between psychological issues. I've never heard of so many people being diagnosed as bipolar as I am today, where, when I was coming up, I don't even know that there was a diagnosis called bipolar at that point. We have a lot of women who are suffering and who are hurting, and they want to be free. They want to get help, but they don't know where to go. So I'm so glad that you shared the resources on your website so people will know where to go, because I've traveled the nation and I've ministered to women in 16 states across the nation. And I have had women my age fall into my arms in tears because they wanted children, but they made that abortion decision. They were rendered infertile, couldn't have children, and now their friends have grandchildren and they have none because of their abortion decision. So we need to help these women be able to get healing and get support as they are going forward. Or like my friend Elaine Riddick, who was, she was raped when she was 13 years old. When she had her son at 14, the state of North Carolina went to her grandmother and had her grandmother, who was illiterate, put her X on a piece of paper, and they sterilized Elaine. And Elaine didn't know she was sterilized until she got married and was trying to have more children. And that's when she discovered that they had sterilized her. We have an issue in this nation, and women are hurting. And some of it is deliberate sterilization like Elaine, and some of it is, a repercussion from that abortion decision. And these doctors who are rendering substandard care to women in the abortion facilities.
Also, a point, if I could add too, I think people need to understand that us in the pro-life movement, we condemn abortion. We're not condemning women. And I think that that's something that people need to understand, because I know myself personally. I mean, you know, the Holy Spirit is dealing with me to be a little more soft, but I guess I just feel like there's no nice way to say it's murder. There's no way to get around that. But just because we're condemning the practice, that doesn't mean we're saying that these women are terrible. You know, you think as a Christian, Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, used to kill Christians before he became one. There's people who committed all types of egregious sins in scripture. And that's one thing I know, not to get too far off the topic, but that's one of the beautiful parts of the Bible, is the men and women that God used so wonderfully, that we hear their failures as well. So there's no illusion that they were somehow perfect people. They were highly imperfect people who many had done absolutely terrible things. However, God forgave them and used them mightily. And so since the abortion crowd, of course, is not going to want to counsel women after the fact, because they want to make it seem like it's no big deal. So if abortion is okay and no big deal, then why would you need counseling? And what so many people don't understand is that us in the pro-life movement, we want to hug you and tell you it's going to be okay and God will forgive you. We are condemning the practice, but we are not judging the women who've had them or the men who've paid for them. We're not judging you. However, that doesn't mean that we can't call out the practice, but we want you to know that there is forgiveness. And I think people need to be more aware of how we want to help you on that healing as well, as you guys just talked about.
Amen. Amen.
Yes. Well, I would like to just kind of bring us back to our topic. And I wanted to mention something pretty profound that Catherine said the other day when we spoke. She said there is only one race, and that's the human race. And she also said the answer to any social justice issue can never be the death of a child. And that's the truth.
Absolutely. We have confused social justice with life, because the abortion industry has so devalued life. They tell our women, you know, that it's a clump of cells, that you know, it's a blob of tissue, and they objectify the child in the womb, and they don't talk about that child as a person, as a human being. And because they objectify the child, we tend to not think of that child as a person that is valuable and has life, should have life. But Planned Parenthood then, once they told us that our babies don't have value, but they attach another value when they go and sell that baby's body parts that they've aborted. So that clump of tissue suddenly has value when these universities and whoever want to buy a human heart or a brain or a liver, or, you know, and Planned Parenthood sells them. 5 years ago, David Daleiden released these videos where he documented that they were selling the body parts of the children that they aborted. Now, whose children are they aborting? Mostly Black and brown babies, because that's where they're located. They're located in the hearts of Black communities and Latino communities. And they have assigned such a value to the babies that one abortionist said she wanted a Lamborghini from selling baby body parts. So we need to recognize that these are children, they're people, and they have value. And they are made, as Katrina said, in the image and likeness of God. They are not clumps of tissue. They have body parts. They have heartbeats. They have fingernails and fingers and toes and so forth, so
on. We did get one question. I wonder if you have any answer to this. Someone asked, are there any specific programs to reach girls, preteen, or even younger with the pro-life message? Do you ladies know of any?
do. Go ahead, Katrina.
No, I was going to say I don't. So since Catherine does.
I do know that there is a curriculum that promotes the pro-life message that can get into the schools. And my goodness, I can't remember the name of it. It's out of Florida. I will find the name of it. But also, a dear friend of mine, Bethany Baumberger, wrote this book. I hope you can see it, Pro-Life Kids. And it is an amazing way to introduce the pro-life message to young children. And I would encourage people to get this book. It has been used outside of abortion centers by some of the sidewalk counselors, and people, women have taken this book and turned around from the abortion center. I don't know if you can see this, but that's the Baumberger family. Mm-hmm. They're in the book. I would encourage people to get this for younger children. And I'm going to remember the name of the program. There is a program in Florida that's out of Florida, but they're nationwide, that has a curriculum that you can use with girls, preteens, and boys in the classroom.
Very good. I want to mention that we at Right to Life of Michigan, especially in the Multicultural Outreach Department, we have developed some programs which we are taking to the kids in high school and youth groups. It's called Meet Maggie. We have a Meet Maggie workshop where we talk about who Margaret Sanger is, why she might have started Planned Parenthood. And so my assistant Jennifer actually came up with the whole thing, the whole workshop. And we have presented it twice now. It's interactive. So we're not telling the kids, you should be pro-life and abortion is bad, Planned Parenthood is bad. We just tell them about Margaret Sanger, about Planned Parenthood, and we let them make their own mind up. And there are other resources as well for younger children at rtl.org. We have curriculum on there that teachers can use in the classroom to teach the younger kids to be pro-life.
If I could add one point, one thing that I think is helpful too is having your children volunteer at a pregnancy center. I think that will also help them as well. I thought that I would throw that out there.
Very good idea. Thank you. Thanks, Christina.
The program that I'm talking about that's nationwide, where you can get the curriculum, is run by a woman named Renata Ferrante, and she's the executive director of Collier Community Abstinence Program in Florida. So if you Google her name, you will get all of her information, and she will even send you a sample of the curriculum for free. And you can take it to your school and get them engaged as well. So it's a powerful resource that you can get in your hands for free to help with bringing the pro-life message and abstinence to young people today.
Very good. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Christina. Thanks so much, ladies, for giving your time, your testimony, and we hope everyone enjoyed listening tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.